I just started a new job and I've been forced to learn ArchiCAD, and I was thinking, I wish there was a tutorial I could watch, a 15-minute video that could just get me started so that I can begin learning and begin working on the job. And there wasn't anything like that for ArchiCAD or for Revit. So I have a 6-hour course out there on YouTube at the moment. Definitely highly recommend going through that if you are using or planning to use Revit. And if you're a student, if you're in the industry at the moment, you're a graduate, you're going to need to know Revit. So I definitely highly recommend going through the Revit beginners course. But if you just want a quick video to get you started, to teach you the very basics, then that is this video right here. We're going to design a quick house, something small, something easy, something typical that is if you're doing a residential design. And we're going to model up that building inside of Revit. This will really just give you the skills that you need to get started, to push you into that Revit world. So let's get into it. So welcome to Revit. The first thing we're going to want to do is open up a new model. This is going to be your project. If you want to learn more about families, I talk about that in my course. But if we click new model, it's going to ask us to create a new template file. And if we go down to the metric architectural template, because we're creating an architecture project, hit OK, it's going to create a new Revit file, a new project, a new model that we can start modeling up this building in. So to get started, it opens up a level 1 floor plan. And the way Revit works is that we can use this floor plan to model up the entire building that will show up in the elevations and sections and 3D views and renders and all of that good stuff. So what we can do is start off by creating a floor slab. And to do that, we're going to use this top ribbon up the top here under the build tab. And you can click on floor. And you can see that there's a little drop down menu there. And if you go to floor architectural, that's how you can put in a new floor slab. So you've got a few options for drawing this floor slab or drawing any shapes in Revit. You can use a line to create a line that creates your slab. Or what we're going to do is use the rectangle tool to then form a new floor slab. Now, as you can see, as we drag this out, the parameters of the floor slab change. We could line this up to be the perimeter that we want it to be, or we could just place it and then edit these values later. And we can do that by clicking this dimension length. So if we click on that, we can actually type in the value we want, which is going to be 10,000. And that's going to be millimeters in this case, because we're using the metric architectural template. So what that's done is change the value of this line here to 10,000. If we were to change this to 15,000, you can see that it extends this line here, but we're going to keep that as 10,000. And then we're going to select this vertical line, which is going to allow us to change the value of the space between here and this line over here. And you could actually change this by locking it onto something else if you wanted to. Make this 16,000. By just typing that in. So I'm thinking this design is going to have an L shape. So what I'm going to do is click on this bottom line here, and we're going to change this dimension to be less than, we're going to maybe go halfway across by dragging this drag end line and dragging this to about 8,000, which is halfway between 16,000. As you can see, that's created equal dimensions on both sides. So we're going to create another line, bring this down, and we're going to say another 10,000, type that in, come around, and you can see that as you're bringing this across, it's going to line up with this wall here and lock onto it. So you want to snap across to that. And I'm going to hit escape to get out of that line. And I'm going to hit escape again because it's still going to be creating lines. So sometimes you have to press escape a few times. And then I want to extend this line down to this new line that we've made at the bottom here. And to do that, we're going to use the trim and extend tool. And if you go up to the top here, you can see under the modify tab that there is a trim and extend to corner tool. If we click on that and we click the corner that we want to extend to and the line that we want to extend, you can see that it's going to create a connection, an intersection between these two lines. And that's great. So once you're happy with your slab, you can go ahead and click the green tick, because at the moment we are still editing it. But by clicking that green tick, we can finish the editing mode. Otherwise, if you want to clear everything you've created just now, you can hit the red X. I don't recommend doing that. Let's hit the green tick. And you can see that it's created a floor slab. Now that the floor slab's in, we're going to want to add in a couple of walls. So if I go up to the top architecture tab here, you can see that there are architectural walls. And if we click on that or click WA to bring that up, you can see that we are now in the edit mode again to create walls, very similar to creating floors. But before we place these walls, we're going to want to edit a few properties first. And you can go over to the properties panel on the side here to do that. So the first thing we want to look at is what kind of wall are we creating? What is the thickness of it? What is the wall made out of? What are the components of the wall? And at the moment you can see that it is a generic 200mm wall. The generic is just stating that it is going to have a default material and default properties, and it's not going to be, made out of brick or timber or stone. It's going to be generic. But if you click on this, you can see that there are other options. So let's say we wanted a masonry brick wall. To do that, we can just go ahead and find a brick wall. This generic 90mm brick wall looks good, but we don't want it to be 90mm. This is the thickness of the wall. This is how wide the wall is. We want it to be more like 240, which is pretty standard for a brick wall. So if we edit the type with this button here, and we click on edit structure, what we can do is edit the thickness of this brick to be 240. And once we are finished with that, we can click OK and click OK again. And that has changed that to a 240mm brick. But as you can see, it hasn't changed the name of it. And that can get confusing sometimes. So usually whenever you're editing the type of a wall, you want to hit duplicate before making any changes. And then it will ask you to rename it. And then you'll rename it a 240mm brick. But in this case, we can just change the name of this because we're not using the 90mm brick. Click OK and you can see that that has changed. As we're placing the wall, it's going to be placing it to a certain height. And to define that height, you can see that there is a unconnected height here, or a top constraint. The top constraint means you can assign a level which will then connect that wall to that level. For example, you can have it set as the level above, or in our case, all we'll need to do is define a height for it. If it's unconnected, this is going to be independent from other materials or other objects in the model. And so if we change this to say 4,000, then once we place this wall, that brick wall is going to be 4,000mm high or 4 meters tall. The last thing that we want to look at is the location line, which is here. If we place a wall on the wall center line, what it's going to be doing is placing that wall on the center line of the point we picked. Now this would be good for some situations, but for us, we want to place it so that the wall is bound on this edge and then going to the inside of the slab. So we can change this location line to be finish face on the interior, and you can see that it will now place that wall with the finish face on the interior. If we want to flip that, we can hit the space button and it can flip it to the side. But we're going to keep it like this. So what we want to do is now pick a point that we can start our wall line from, and that can be this corner here. As you bring this down, you'll see that it snaps onto the corner of the slab. And that's good because we want it to snap onto there. You can see that little rectangle that it snaps to. So if we click on that, we can actually continue creating walls. And we're going to keep on drawing around the outside of the slab to draw in these exterior walls. And once we finish up, you'll see that after we press escape twice, it's going to link all of those walls together, and it's going to create a chain of walls. Now we want to add in some interior walls to separate the space. So if we go ahead and create another wall, we can choose a different wall type, and I want to go for something that's a bit thinner. This interior blockwork that's 100mm would probably do the trick for us, but we want to make sure that it's going to the right levels again. We want to double check all of these properties before we place it. You can see that it's defaulted to have the location line on the wall center line, and we're just going to change this to be the finish face exterior. And the base constraint, so this is what the wall is sitting on. It's currently sitting on the lowest level, which is level 1, which is good. And you can see that we're unable to change the unconnected height value. And that's because the wall is going to be constrained to a top constraint, which is up to level 2. What this is saying is that level 2 is actually 4,000mm above level 1, which is actually what we wanted. But if we wanted to change this manually, we can click on this little arrow here to the right of that box, and we can change it to be unconnected, and we can edit that value. But instead, we're going to constrain it to level 2, because what this means is that if we were to continue creating walls all over this floor plan, and then we changed our mind that it wasn't 4,000mm tall, we wanted it to be 5,000mm tall, then rather than having to change every individual wall's height because they're all unconnected, by constraining it to a level, all we'd have to do is change that level and it will change the value of all of those walls. So we're going to keep that top constraint to level 2 and we're going to start drawing in some internal walls. I'm going to bring this across and I'm just going to draw these in. So now that we've got our internal walls in, we're going to want to add some doors. And again, we're going to go to the architecture tab and we're going to hit the door button, or we can press DR. And at the moment, we've got a single flush door, which is 915 millimeters wide with a height of 2,134 millimeters. And that'll do just fine. That's a pretty standard door, but you can also change this with the drop down menu. Otherwise, you can also load in other doors by going load family. And here we can find our library and we can find where doors are. And we can also have a look at some of these other doors by using the up or down arrows to scroll through and look at a preview of all of these doors. But for now, we're going to keep using this default door. So the main entrance of our building is actually going to be down in this corner here. The main entrance is going to come into here and into a main living space. So let's go ahead and place a door there. You can see that it's locked onto the middle. You can see that once we place that, these temporary dimensions are showing 530.5 millimeters from this wall and 530.5 from this wall. So let's say that we actually wanted our door to swing from the other side. All you'd have to do is click on that door and you can press this arrow button here and you can see that you can flip it either side. We're going to have it flipping in and swinging like this. Now we're just going to add in a few more doors. 500 mils off of this wall, and again 500 millimeters off this wall. So now let's say we wanted to add an opening in between the entrance and the living room. All we'd have to do is select that wall and hit wall opening at the top here. We can then decide on how far across we want this opening to go, and we're just going to select one way and then come across 2500 millimeters. And you can edit that afterwards by clicking on this temporary dimension and draw that in. Now at the moment, you can select this to have a look at the properties. Now at the moment, you can see that it's currently constrained. The base is constrained to level 1. So the bottom of the opening is on the ground floor, which is at the height of 0, which is good. And then the top constraint is up to level 2, which was 4,000 millimeters tall. But then you can see that the top offset is also off by 1561.6 millimeters. So the head height of this opening is 1560 millimeters below level 2, which is 4,000 millimeters tall. And that's pretty good. But let's say we wanted to have a look at this in a 3D view. To do that, we can actually go up to the 3D button up the top here, or we can go down to view and then find 3D view. So let's click on that. And now we've got a 3D model of our building that we've already put in. We can orbit around the model by holding down the scroll button and pressing shift at the same time, and then just by panning around the model like this. Otherwise, you can hold the scroll wheel down to just pan across. So you can see that is the opening we've just placed in. You can see the doors we've placed in and these internal walls, and they're all to the correct height, which is really good. To go back to our level 1 view, we can go down to that button up the top here, or we can go down to the project browser, which is going to give us all of our views and drawings. For example, we've got ceiling plans, elevations, and floor plans at the moment. But let's go back to our level 1 floor plan. So now we're going to want to add in some windows. If we go back to the architecture tab and click on window or press WN, we can then find some more windows that we like by either picking them from the list here or loading in families. And we can then choose one we like and start to place them in. Now, some of these you can adjust the values of and the parameters of later once you've placed it. But for now, we're going to go ahead and place some of these windows around. So now you can see we've got some windows in. I've just placed them around randomly, but they all look the same. So let's say that this one was actually a lot wider than some of the other ones around the place. So to change the width of it, what we're going to want to do is go to edit type, and you can see that it's got a defined width. This is a 406 millimeter by 610 millimeter window. But you can see under dimensions that there are ways to change these parameters. Now, if we were to change this to say 600 wide, you're going to see that that's going to change this window width. but it's also going to change the width of all of these other windows that we've placed. And that's because Revit is a BIM, building information modeling software, and that's one of the bonus and one of the perks of using BIM, because it is very adaptive. But what if we didn't want to change all of these windows? That's when you would hit duplicate, rename this to a 600mm by 610mm window, click OK, and then make that edit. Now I'm just going to leave this as B because I hope that makes sense to you. Now you can probably see how this is going to be problematic when you're working with other people on the same model, because if you make a change to this and someone else has placed this, this family in other parts of the model and you don't see it, then you'll be changing stuff that you won't be able to see, and you can cause some big problems. So that's why whenever you're making a change to a family or a wall type or a window or anything like that, always duplicate it first, and then you can make the change. Now the final thing to do, if we go to our 3D view, you can see that we've got our windows in, we've got our doors in and our openings. Our windows aren't exactly in the right heights that we want them to be. So to change this, what we can do is click on the window and you can see there's a sill height and a head height. Now changing one of these is going to change the other because it's parametric. If we were to change the sill height, which is actually the lowest point of the window where the sill is, that's how far it is off of the ground. So with a sill height of 915, this is going to mean that the sill is 915mm above the ground. So let's change this to 1600. And once we apply those changes, you can see it's changed to now be 1600mm above from that ground level. But the head height is also changed, which is this top height here. Now obviously changing one of them is going to change the other. If you wanted to change the height of the window, as in how high it is, that's when you would go into the edit type and change the height of it. So now all we need to do is add in a roof. And that can be a bit tricky, but it's actually really quite simple in Revit. So if we go back to our level 1 floor plan and we click on the architecture tab again, go to build a roof, we can choose either roof by footprint, roof by extrusion, or roof by face. What I usually use 99% of the time is roof by footprint. So we're trying to create the roof on the level 1 floor plan, which is going to assign the roof to be on level 1, which is 0mm from ground level. What Revit's trying to tell us with this error message is that why would we want the roof to be on the lowest level? We want this to go up to a level above, and the roof is actually going to sit on top of all of the walls, which are 4000mm tall, but these are also constrained to level 2. So we want the roof to sit on level 2 as well. So yes, let's change this to level 2. Now, similar to the floor slab, we are now using the same idea that we started with, where you've got the line tool, you've got rectangles and other shapes that you can use, including splines and arcs and all of that good stuff. And we're going to have to choose a roof type before we place the roof. You can see that the base level can be changed after we've done this. So we could change this to level 1. But again, that's going to be on the lowest level, so we don't want to do that. We want to add this to level 2, and there's a few settings we can change here, but what we want to do is start drawing this in. So we're going to use the line tool, or better yet, we're going to pick the lines of these outer walls and create a roof around that. And we can do that by using the pick line tool. So let's click these outside lines, and you're going to see them start to draw in the shape of our roof. All I'm doing is selecting these lines when they turn blue, and you can see that that's created that shape for us. Now, if we create this by clicking the green tick, what you're going to see is that we've got a roof. And that looks pretty damn good. And so there you have it. That's how you create a basic house in Revit. As you can see, we've now got a floor plan of that house. We've got a 3D view of that house. We've got some elevations and sections of that house. So you can see that we've got elevations here. And Bob's your uncle, that's how you create a basic house in Revit. Now this was a really basic get you started guide. If you'd really like to dig deep and learn all of the beginner tools and tips and tricks to learn Revit, you can feel free to go through my Revit course for beginners. For students, if you're starting Revit, this is for you. That course is available here on YouTube, and you can check it out with the link in the description below or by pressing it here. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you in that video.